And welcome to the Gotham Outsiders, our Batman book club. Recently escaped from Arkham, I'm your host, Bat Obsessive Chris. And kissing everyone to make them into zombies, it's my co-host, TJ.
Hello, everyone. I am your Chris proclaimed Batman Talon, I think,
Yes,
Chris?
You've been upgraded.
Yes, I just graduated from Acolyte. And we have a very, very exciting guest with us today.
Yes, we have co-creator of the show Skins, Jamie Brittain.
Hello. Hello, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm all right. Doing okay.
Yeah, you were teasing.
I was just saying how I was like starstruck a little bit. Skins was big in my youth, so that was a very influential show to me. And for a brief period, I really wanted to be a screenwriter, and you were such an influence on me. So like, anyway, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've taken in recent years to sort of pointing out that what a massive nepo baby I was in creating a show with my dad.
It's like you and Dan Levy, right? Like you're in good company on that, creating with your dad thing.
If only I could achieve the hotness of Dan Levy, I could.
We all aspire to the hotness of Dan Levy, let's be honest.
I'll tell you, I was once in a bar in London, just in a pub, and me and my friend Hugh were sat just having a pint of beer. Yeah, so I was in a bar, and I think the program for the London Film Festival was actually open in front of me and my friend, and we were looking for if we could get into a screening of For Your Consideration, because we'd spent the 90s just like obsessed with Christopher Guest movies. Basically, they were like our religion, particularly like A Mighty Wind and Best in Show. We were just like, that was like, we'd get drunk and listen to the Mighty Wind soundtrack. That was like our main activity. And then so Hugh goes to the bar to get us a drink, and he comes back from the bar going, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. And I'm like, what? And he points over at the bar, and Eugene Levy is sat there just nursing what looked like a Bloody Mary. And like, you know, I grew up in a household, you know, my dad was a TV writer. Hugh's mum is a writer as well. She wrote Mamma Mia the musical. So like, we've been around famous people every now and again. It's not like necessarily the biggest deal. However, seeing him there was just absolutely mind-blowing. And we didn't pluck up courage to go and say hello to him. We just stared at him terrified from across
That's fair.
From across the bar. And that was just unbelievably awesome. So we were talking about the hotness of Dan Levy, and also the sort of semiotic hotness of Jim's dad from the American Pie movies.
Accurate, yeah. You need to tell TJ to watch Schitt's Creek, because I've been trying to get him to watch it.
I know, it's on my list.
He just watched Ted Lasso, and I'm like, it's the same energy. It's the same energy. You'd love it.
Jamie, that's kind of how I felt DMing you. So redirecting this to how I got Jamie on here. So I guest on a Skins podcast once in a while, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write Jamie Brittain and see if you want to come on here. And we chit-chatted a little bit, and you very politely were like, not right now. And I said, we kind of got chit-chatting, and I just said how much I love this show and your work. And we kind of ended the conversation, but then I was like, you know what? I'm going to see if this man is into Batman. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the Skins characters, Sid, was kind of based on you a little bit. So I was like, you know what? I know that character is kind of a nerd. Like, maybe Jamie's into Batman. So it panned out.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you could probably take a solid guess just looking at me that I am something of a bat head myself.
Hey, in my defense, I hadn't seen you yet.
No, that's true. That's true.
But now, oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
No, and I did
a lot of bad energy here.
I did listen to a bit of that Skins podcast. Brilliant podcast. I'm really impressed with it. It's really good. Just like the little bits I listened to were so like interesting and intimate, and sort of all the things that, you know, Skins at its best was. I've just kind of somewhat run out of stuff to say about that show now. At this point in time, it's been a while now.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, listeners, check it out. It's Oh Wow, the podcast, and you should check out the episodes I'm on. I hear they're pretty good. I always come on and defend the characters that everyone hates. So that's kind of my thing now.
Well, one of the just on that podcast, actually, like one of the ones I was listening to, like talking about some of the like slightly less cohesive episodes of the show, and the show was always pretty ramshackle, and sometimes probably a bit too ramshackle. But it's just really nice hearing people like engaging with like the intent of the show, even if like we didn't quite necessarily nail things perfectly, which we definitely didn't do. So it's really nice to hear like like I listened to them talk a bit about like the psychosis storyline we did with Effie, which I that was one of the ones that I was kind of behind, and I tried very hard to make that feel real and sort of consult people who had experiences with it. And in the end, you're making a teen drama, so it's always going to come out pretty shonky. It's hard to express yourself in that medium, really. And so it was nice to hear, the host on that show talking about that, and like engaging with the intent and the ideas behind it, rather than like nitpicking, which is what I would do if I was on that podcast. So like it's nice to hear that,
Well, we are again honored to have you here because I'm a big fan. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just gonna say, I think if one thing having a Batman podcast can say is that imperfect media can have a really powerful impact. It doesn't have to be absolutely right all the time for it to be meaningful and positive for people.
It's sort of the nature of fandom as well, isn't it? Like the idea that you're a fan of something and there's a massive like wide spectrum of what that thing is, and because you're a fan of it, you know that you're going to have some kind of response to it, even if it doesn't always have to be like utter jubilation. And I guess that's kind of why people end up sort of
I love it,
assembling their personalities around these properties, because it gives you a sort of yardstick, I guess, to sort of check yourself by.
Oh, that's so powow. I gotta sit back and think about that a minute.
Are you a writer?
Yeah.
Do you
write with that voice? Because
wow.
I can tell you this, I talk a lot of bullshit in pubs, and
it shows.
I've absolutely mastered making rhetorical flights of fancy that sound like I'm arriving at a point, but are in fact.
Well, I'm on board the train that you're arriving on, so it's good.
Well, I tricked you into talking about skins for a minute, but I guess I should ask you about some Batman stuff too. So like,
what's your relationship with Batman?
What's your fave? What was your first?
So Batman's an interesting one, right? Because I wouldn't say I'm like Batman is one of my things I'm a biggest fan of. I think in the 90s, when I was growing up, so I was born in 1985, so Batman Forever came out in 1995, so I was 10. And like, I don't know how old you guys were around then, but from here in the UK,
he wasn't born.
I was negative. I was negative 1.
You were 3, yeah. So the level of hype for Batman Forever was just insane. It was inescapable, and it was just like, when people talk about the sort of domination of MCU stuff at the moment and sort of malign it, like Batman Forever was just everywhere. There was like 4 or 5 songs in the charts, one of which, Kiss from a Rose by Seal, is one of the best songs ever written, which is like incredible.
100%.
It's such a good song. But that was everywhere, and there were just toys and merchandise and books and video games. And like, thinking back on that time, I remember a vague sense of being kind of harried and marketed at, like really, really, really intensely, and kind of almost like kind of being sort of press ganged into being a kind of Batman fan, because it was just such an aggressive marketing campaign. And Jim Carrey, who was basically Jesus to boys my age at that time, was in that movie. And like, the movie itself, I remember, is like a real, like, seeing it as a 10-year-old, it was right in the middle of the period kind of between Jurassic Park and, I don't know, Godzilla or something, where I seem to see sort of every movie, and they were all these and like, Batman Forever is this kind of ridiculous high camp feast for the eyes. And and similarly with the Tim Burton ones, like they're very much their own thing. Batman's definitely in them, but they are these like weird, gothic, crazy, like fever dreams. You can definitely tell it's the director of Beetlejuice making those movies. They're Tim Burton movies more than they are like Batman, and really unique and kind of fascinating movies for that. But that means that, like, in the 90s, it was very hard to like put a finger on like which is the bit of Batman I connected with. I love the animated series,
Yes.
but that was very hard to find on British television. Like, just because you're in the era of like being able to regularly watch something is just difficult. So whenever that was on, I was always like, "Whoa." But it was very hard to find that. So the comics were kind of those were the point that and the other one was the 1960s TV show, which was on a lot in the UK, and I still love. It's still really, really good.
So good.
The campiness.
So my main origin story with Batman, I think, as like a fan, was for some reason, my dad probably had bought a copy of A Death in the Family, which is the trade paperback collection of the second Robin's death, which I'd read when I was really, really little. I think I just literally found a copy in my attic, and I was like, "Ooh, Batman!"
And you're like, "This looks fun."
And then you're traumatized for life.
Well, I think I was kind of outraged and terrified by the front cover. It's got this amazing, iconic front cover. I think it's done by Mike Mignola, the creator of Hellboy. So it's got that kind of sort of visceral weirdness to it. I didn't understand a word of it because it was all far above my head.
Fair. It's a weird one. it's a weird comic.
And this is like pre-Batman Forever, I think. I think the house I remember buying it in, I must have been like 6 or 7 or something. So I was really young. Didn't understand much of it, but it was very like exciting and weird and strange. And then the comic we're going to talk about later today, that kind of came sometime afterwards. And it's quite good because that was how I engaged with Batman through the 90s, was buying those collections of those limited series or the sort of series. So like Knightfall was one, Contagion.
I love Contagion.
Contagion I read so much of. Like,
it's a weird vibe to read it right now.
Yeah.
But I do like Contagion.
Oh yeah. And like when the pandemic was first starting, like that was my main touchstone of like, this is like Contagion Batman story.
I am gonna be on a plane like Tim Drake with people coming down with this Contagion.
Yeah.
Scared.
And the bloody tear,
tear.
So yeah, like reading through from kind of Knightfall through those comics to, I think I went back and read Hush and the Red Hood stuff, which was quite cool because it gave me, over the course of a decade or so, like a pretty complete narrative from Jason Todd dying to, and he gets referenced. I remember when I first read Knightfall, like him being referenced and me doing the Leonardo DiCaprio gif of pointing, "Oh, I've read that one. That's the one I've read." So
I love that.
I really enjoyed that kind of run of Batman. I think because they felt like a really like solid sandwich of like in terms of like a meal. It's like they were very basic. They weren't like, because often you'd see The Dark Knight Returns or Year One or one of the weirder comics you'd see and you'd be like, "Ooh, that's like adult and difficult." Whereas these were like straight down the line, meat and potatoes comics. And that was always a real in for me because it seemed to me it didn't have any of the kind of camp excesses of the movies. It was just a kind of comic strip that you would recognize if you'd been reading these comics in the 50s or whatever. Yeah,
you heard it here first. Jamie says that Batman is not just a snack, he's the whole meal.
Absolutely.
Well, before we jump into Knightfall, which I imagine we're all going to have a lot to say about, we have a little game. So you should know, on this here show, TJ never wins because I do not let him. But so do not worry. Just kidding. TJ always has a fair shot and everybody knows it. But we are going to play a kind of a less competitive game this time, more of a collaborative one. We are going to play a game that I call Casting Call. Okay. You have with you every person related to Gotham, related to Batman, any character, hero or villain. And the two of you, your job is, since Jamie, you have some experience with this, you are going to cast them in a show. The characters are in your show. You can decide together. You might want to do a teen drama. Maybe you want to do something else. It's up to you. Up to you what you want to do. But you two have to decide who Batman would be, who, Catwoman would be, what kind of roles are they filling in your show.
This is so creative. All right, Jamie, what kind of show are we doing?
All right, how about we do a
For
kind
example.
of, if we're in the 90s, why don't we do like a 90s knockoff, like Friends, sub Friends.
Oh yes.
Oh
sitcom
my god.
type
Okay.
show.
It's like a
Okay.
Friends sitcom.
Yeah,
So
like
it's gonna be
Dar-
like Bat Friends.
yeah, like Bat Friends, Dharma and Batman. Mad
love
about
that.
Mad about Batman.
Mad about Batman. Oh God,
All
why
right,
isn't
so-
that the name of our show? That was good.
So who's living in the apartment building? Who are the friends?
So you're gonna want to have like your main protagonist, your sort of guy who's like, oh, these crazy people I live with, and it's so difficult being me.
The straight man.
The straight man, yeah. And who would you cast there? I mean, it's tempting to go for Bats himself, but I
know,
think,
like, is it Bruce? He's the only straight man in his Bat.
yeah,
Come on.
maybe Bruce, but maybe it's like maybe you could have maybe have like Azrael being the
My
straight guy.
God, Azrael.
See, I don't know
love
enough
that.
about him. I'm
I'm
still
obsessed.
uneducated.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Azrael. I like that. Azrael is the straight man in your comedy is everything to me.
Yeah,
But is
I
he
just
not like a weird religious character?
He
yeah,
is.
he's like a Manchurian candidate guy who can be activated and
He's
turned into like a-
basically the Winter Soldier with religious trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, so is he the weird one and just everyone else is normal, but he thinks they're all weird?
well, he's normal most of the time, and then something
Okay.
triggers him, and then he
Yeah.
becomes like this kind of crazy guy.
Maybe
Gotcha.
like
And then
season 1 finale, something weird happens, and you suddenly realize the straight man of your show is not the straight man after all.
His friends. One of them has to be Tim Drake.
Yeah, Tim Drake.
Like it.
I guess Tim Drake, the kind of wingman best friend.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Yeah.
picturing it as a How I Met Your Mother almost, where they're at
Yeah.
the bar regularly.
That's right. Yeah. And then there's the kind of Kramer-like, the kind of crazy neighbor. I mean, Joker's the obvious choice, but
Yes.
I would actually go for Alfred Pennyworth being the
Oh
guy
my
who's like
God.
kind of coming in like, hey, can I borrow some socks or whatever?
He just comes in and serves them tea once in a while.
Yeah,
Like, how
yeah,
did
exactly. Yeah,
you have a key? How'd you get in here?
yeah.
Oh, I'm obsessed. All right.
And then
Yeah.
the eternal girlfriend, the sort of will she, won't they? Again, Selena Kyle seems like the obvious one, but I'm going to go for Huntress.
Ooh, Huntress and
Oh.
Azrael is a cute ship. Is that what
Yeah,
we're
I reckon
shipping?
that.
I like that.
I'm not sure of her sexuality canonically now. I think I may have caught an inkling of something in that realm. But that's
Everyone's
okay.
bi.
Everyone's
That's what we say here. At
We've
least.
decided that everyone is bi.
It's like Selena can be the bartender when they're at the bar.
Ooh,
Oh, I like that.
Tell me all your-
Yeah, that's
Tell
very
me all
good.
your problems as she's like stealing the jewelry off your wrist.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So Jason Todd should totally be like the regular they see at the bar that isn't like part of the main crew, but he's just like drinking there at all times.
I love it.
Poor
And then
Jason.
like the crazy guy who like the ugly naked guy type thing. Like what's one of these
Yes.
things like I've never like looked too closely because it's far too alarming, but all that like crazy shit they do now with like trans-dimensional Joker who's like half
Mhm.
Batman, half Joker, and half
Ugh.
Dr. Manhattan from
Yes.
Watchmen.
The
What is
Joker
called-
who laughs.
The
Is that
Joker
what
who
it
laughs is like the ugly naked guy across the road. You never see him, but
Oh.
everyone's like, oh god, the
Constantly
Joker.
talk about the Joker who laughs across
Yeah.
the street. I'm obsessed with this. This is good. So do we have
Who-
any the girlfriends that aren't gonna be the end game? You know, the ones that come in for a season and clearly are the wrong call.
Well, you mean like the people who are like desperately
Bernard.
attracted to Jason Alexander in
Yeah.
this stream of hotties coming for
Yes.
coming for
Yes.
George Costanza's in Seinfeld. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it. Well, I mean, you've got a lovely roll call of your your solid bat ladies. You got your poison ivies and the like. Maybe just like I like the girlfriend that Batman has in Knightfall, like Chandra, whatever she's called. Like,
Yeah.
The one that he blows off for the entirety of
is
Knightfall.
she called Dr. Chandra Kinsolving? Is that her name?
I think so, yes. It's
I have
perfect.
no idea who she
I think-
was.
I felt so bad
I-
for her.
I think she turns out to have like genocide powers as well.
Oh. Yeah,
Like-
his type is dangerous and possibly deadly. So
I hate when that happens. I feel like Chase Meridian would be great on like a sitcom.
oh my
She'd
God.
be in like a different show than everyone else.
Yeah, speaking of the Batman movies, Chase Meridian, oh my God. She would definitely, yes, she would come in and everyone would be like, what the hell is the tone change of this show for these episodes she's in it?
She would even be like a therapist for characters, and they
I
would just
like
be
it.
the weirdest scenes.
Yes.
Nicole Kidman in that movie just imprinted on the sort of prepubescent me in such a fundamental way.
Oh my god, what a sexual awakening.
It really was.
Every
She is
time we
just-
see AMC movies now, we're just like, it's Chase.
We make movies better.
I don't know if they do this in the UK. So that might be a
but
very American
I know
reference.
I know
Okay, good.
from listening to a podcast where people talk about those adverts.
Those adverts are fascinating.
I saw a
Just
picture of a guy in
tiny.
a cinema saluting it when it came on, which I thought was
Yes.
pretty good.
So funny.
Oh my
All
god,
right,
I
how
love
did
it.
we do? How'd we do, Chris?
I think I'm green lighting the show. We're gonna get 6 seasons and a movie.
Wow.
Woo! All right, I'll take the credit, even though Jamie did 99% of that heavy lifting.
I'm just delighted to be commissioned for once, even if it is an imaginary show. Like, I just take that.
The show is real in our hearts.
Absolutely. I mean, that's far more real than the shows I've taken to networks over the years.
Oh.
Can I write like one episode a season?
You get a writing credit, but you do almost no writing on the show.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of episodes if it's a sitcom. Huh?
Yeah, very 24 episode seasons. TJ writes one a season.
Yeah, I'll do one.
So helpful.
No, you can write all of them, and then I'll come in afterwards
Yeah.
and spoil them all by
Yes. Punch up writer. I like it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Amazing.
Well, that was absolutely beautiful. So that was the first time playing casting call, but I feel like we're gonna have to bring that one back because that one was fun.
Oh, that's cute.
Mostly I'm just making you all write fan fiction right in front of me is what's happening here. But so now should we jump into Knightfall?
Yeah.
Let's do it. And specifically, Knightfall Volume 1,
Yes.
the 25th anniversary edition.
Because there is how many volumes of Knightfall did you say, TJ?
There's so many. I think it's like 9 altogether. There's like the prelude and then I picked up Volume 1 and it was like 600 pages and I said, yeah, that's not happening. Let's do the shorter edition.
Well, we're actually doing Nightfall Volume 1, Part 1, aren't we? It's
Yes.
Nightfall
Probably.
Part 1, Broken
Yeah.
Bat, because then there's Part 2, which is Who Rules the
Right.
Night.
It's it's inexplicably hard. So if you're curious, it's the one that has 280 pages, not the one that has 600 pages.
Yeah. So we got to the Bane breaking the back, which is what I was here for.
I
So
wasn't
I've
expecting
never
when
read it.
when TJ told me we're gonna get as far as Bane breaking his back, I wasn't expecting it to be like the last fucking panel. I was
So
like, wait,
good.
that's it?
Yeah.
They really
It
just
was-
yeah.
It was very much act 1 of
Mhm.
this whole story. And like
Mhm.
part of me is like, I want to know what happens next, but also I don't know if I have the time.
So much. I didn't realize I mean that arc is classic, right? And I've picked up
Yeah.
parts of it through time, and I've never just sat down and read it all. I did not realize how long that was. I'm trying to imagine. I mean, were you collecting week to week? Were you reading this for like years?
No, I just had
Yeah.
a paperback which had
Okay.
Broken Bat and Who Rules the Night in it.
Yeah.
And I've never read any further than that, like
Oh, fair.
in the Nightfall series. So I just had those, and I was just
okay.
like, well, and at the end, that ends on a cliffhanger too, Part 2.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, well, I assume this all
Yeah.
turns out fine. Like,
Batman is still Batman, so
yeah.
Just watch the
yeah,
movie.
well, I guess he wasn't Batman for a little while, but
But I mean,
So-
at the time, I found it like it was a really good, because it was sort of my first proper Batman book. It's a really good like place to start. I found like it's quite a good primer on
Yeah.
Batman, because even though like it's a bit different because he's so like endlessly knackered through
because
the
he has
comic.
COVID the whole time.
Yeah, he has
Like,
COVID.
He just
I've
has
been
long
seeing-
COVID.
You've been posting on Twitter just all of the exhausted Batman images from this comic, which are constant.
Was this him like, because I know he gets addicted to Venom at one point. Is this like right after that? Which is why he's so like,
I think this is before that. He's
Yeah, no.
he's
Okay.
exhausted just because there's been a bunch
Life.
of stuff happening, and also because Superman has just died, which I didn't know at the time.
Ah.
I just-
Emotionally drained because of his boyfriend's death. It's hard.
It's really weird because one thing that the collector's edition that you guys read leaves off is the issue where Bane breaks everyone out of prison,
Yeah, I know. It just
Mm.
references that, and I was like, where did that
which
go?
is like a really good issue, and I'd never noticed, but Batman and
Yeah.
Robin are both wearing armbands that sort of
The morning. Oh,
mourning dead Superman. Yeah,
That's so
Aw.
sad.
and I do remember at the time that the other big comic book around was Superman getting his ass handed to him by Doomsday, and
Yeah, fair.
this comic being a kind of response to that. It's like, well, yeah, Superman gets mauled to death by Doomsday, and Batman gets his back broken by Bane, and those
Good
being
lord.
yeah. But no, I find
DC readers at the time were going through it.
yeah, it was a tricky time for the world. History had ended, and the Gulf War had ended, and everything was fine, and we had to work out who we were and what we were doing, and this is the best way we could do about it.
Collective existential crisis.
Yeah, it's a sort of pre-Lewinsky Batman. We're just trying to work.
This was Bane's first appearance, which like I had no idea that Bane was only created in the 90s. I thought he had been around a really long time, and then he was in the Batman
big,
movie,
right? That it feels like he's been around forever.
And he was in the Batman and Robin movie, which came out in the 90s. So like he wasn't around that long before he made his movie debut.
Yeah, I remember being like, I wasn't old enough or cool enough to sort of smoke a cigar, but I remember sort of wanting to have a cigar and saying, that's not Bane. Bane in the comics is, with my little kid cigar, Bane in the comics is clever. He's genius level intellect, I think you'll find, not this hulking brute from Batman and Robin.
How do we feel about Tom Hardy Bane? What's the general consensus in the room?
Yeah, he's all right.
Silence.
My feelings about Batman, past the first Christopher Nolan films is very much a kind of bit of a shrug for me. I'm kind of I've seen all of them. Haven't seen the most recent one actually, but
the most recent one is you mean the one that
the Robert Pattinson.
The Robert Pattinson
That's the
one.
best one,
Gotcha.
actually.
Yeah, I'm slightly protesting it because I know that like the last two it was down to for who was going to be Batman was Pattinson and Nick Holt.
Hey, I'm salty too.
TJ is not over it. Nicholas
I want
Hoult
him
is
to
the love of
come.
his life.
I want him to be Hush or Two-Face in the sequel. I think
It
he'd
would
be
be with
great.
Hush because they kind of look similar. I could see.
And if he
that.
was the runner-up, like it's kind of like metatextual.
I mean, the thing is
funny.
that I get why they went for Pattinson. Pattinson's great. He's a really good actor.
Yeah.
But like with Nick, like the thing about Nick is I got a rare tweet from him the other day because I'm not like mates with him or whatever, but he follows me on Twitter and because the Renfield stuff was coming out, and I said that the secret best thing about Nick Holt is that he's amazing at playing creepy little guys, which is true. He really is. Like he's always been really good at that.
That's adorable. I love that.
From About a Boy onwards, he's been great at playing creepy
You're
little guys.
right. He was creepy in that.
But the thing is that now he so is like Bruce Wayne. He's just like, he looks amazing in a suit. He does like watch adverts. He loves driving fast cars and having like, beautiful women on his arm. Like he would be so good at that aspect of Bruce Wayne. And now I gather that's not quite the movie that they made. So I can understand why they went for our Pats.
But hey, we're getting Renfield. I'm like,
Renfield.
we didn't get him
I'm
as
excited.
Batman, but Renfield looks really good.
Renfield
I think
looks
I'd
amazing.
probably take that over him.
Yeah.
Nick Holt was like big crush of mine when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
you had Nicole Kidman, I had Nicholas Holt.
We when we were casting the show, when we were casting Skins, I was like, I printed out a picture. We were trying to work out like getting a mood board of who we wanted for the cast, and I printed out a picture of Ian Somerhalder. Ian Somerhalder?
Yes.
Boone from Lost.
Loved him too.
And he has this like he's amazingly good looking guy, right? He's got this like fantastic bone
and he's got the
structure.
blue eyes too.
He's got blue eyes, and I put that on the wall of the office, and then the next day someone came in with Nick Holt. It's like, wow, I can just order that kind of. That's the power.
I didn't realize that was on the menu.
Yeah.
You see that reference? You see what I did there?
Yeah, it's good.
Oh
It's good. I like that.
The menu. I love that too.
I've seen
Thank
that,
you. Thank you for getting my joke 5 minutes later.
I love a basic brunette. Come on.
He's gorgeous. He is gorgeous.
Anyway, I can make you talk about Nicholas Holt for the rest of the time, but
that is it. That is the length of that is my entire take on Nick Holt. That's all I got.
So.
He's a creepy little guy, and I like that. I love that.
guy.
That's so cute.
And his eyes, though. Wow.
But back to Knightfall.
What about Knightfall?
Yeah, Knightfall?
Okay, so Jamie mentioned that this was a really good place to start, and I feel like I can totally see that because like it's kind of a smorgasbord. Did I say that right?
Nope.
Nope. I tried.
I'm not
what
alone.
I meant.
Yes, you
Okay.
did.
Jamie's like, yes, you got it. That's the English. That's the American pronunciation.
It wasn't. It was not. There were extra letters, but sure.
It's like you can keep trying things because the characters just keep popping up, kind of like in the Hush book. So like you have a little bit of Joker, a little bit of Riddler, you have Zaz.
It
they just
honestly
kind of pop
reminded
up.
me, we just read Batman Eternal, and this is sort of very similar to that as well, where it's almost villain of the week kind of episodes leading up to a bigger plot, which I really liked. I enjoyed that a lot.
I have in my notes, I was like, is this not the same plot as Batman Eternal? Because there's like
It's
this
just
big master plan, but then the plan is that there is no plan.
It's 100% the same plot. Look, if you're good enough, you could get away with doing the same plot multiple times.
Yeah, and it is funny that the master plan that Bane has, like this genius level intellect, he's fond of talk, and like at the end of it, Batman says like, you are the single most collection of, you're the single most evil and crazy person I've ever met. And Bane's like, easily, he says. And
Thank
like,
you.
and it's like, what do you do? Well, I broke out all the prisoners from Arkham and gave them all guns. The end.
The end.
And like,
he made them do all the work.
I love that as a plan, because Batman, obviously being so logical, his main thing is that he gets tripped up when something is inherently illogical. Like it was true random, and he was like, how am I supposed to figure this out? Meanwhile, Tim Drake the whole time is like, it's random, and Batman's like, that's not possible, and he's like, random.
I mean, it's funny to talk about Tim Drake, because this was my first sort of experience of him reading this, and I know enough to know that like he's like still a very big character in the comics, and kind of
he is the love of our lives on this podcast.
Yes, and I know you guys absolutely adore him. But like to encounter him for the first time in Knightfall was really good, because you get that kind of sense of him as he really wants Batman to like him, and he really wants to help out, and like as a kid, him being this kid who's like really desperate for Batman's approval. As a kid, I'm kind of desperate for Batman's approval, so it's like a really good like audience surrogate, and Batman's behaving like a complete dick to him all the way through this comic, and not letting him help, and like just generally being horrible to him. And for me, that kind of gives the comic, because it's Batman, it's kind of it's pretty basic emotionally, really, in the world of Alan Moore and all that sort of stuff. So I appreciated having that kind of in the comic of like Tim's journey, and that continues into the sort of second part of like trying to work out what he's supposed to do now. Batman's AWOL. So I think that's a really nice kind of anchor that the comic has, and you really root for him whenever he's there.
I know, I love it. It is definitely like a condensed version of everything that is Tim Drake. It's him being a sarcastic little shit, like constantly every time he opens his mouth, which is so fun. But then also, you're saying like the kind of abandonment issues almost of him like this is in the era where he's kind of forced himself onto Batman as a Robin, and Batman's not over Jason's death at all, so he's not really letting him do anything. And you definitely see him like both knowing he needs a Robin, he has to do this for Batman, but also realizing how like thwarted he constantly is by Batman. And I think the comparison we made, TJ, about it being like Eternal really struck me, because the plot line of Eternal is inherently that when he is run down like this, he ultimately has to turn to the people he trusts to take over for him. Whereas in Knightfall, he never makes that choice, and ultimately it like almost destroys him. So it's maybe some growth. I don't know.
He definitely feels like a kid in over his head. One of my favorite Tim moments is actually in Contagion, which is it's just this like really small moment, because he has to team up with Catwoman for a while.
Yes.
And Catwoman puts on her like snow Catwoman outfit, and he turns around and looks at her, and she looks like ridiculously kind of sort of buxom and sexy, and he just has no idea of what to say to her. He just goes and I just always thought that was really good, because it was like
relatable.
It's relatable. She's ridiculous, and people don't call out comics enough for like the fact that she's wearing her kind of bondage snowsuit for such an occasion.
Are you too aware what that comic launched in the fandom? It's not a ship, don't get worried. It's not a ship, it's something way cuter.
What's that?
Do either one of you know? There's a whole thing spinning out of those times when Tim Drake teams up with Catwoman. where the fandom has collectively made an alternate universe where she decides to adopt him away from Batman and he becomes Cat Lad. It is the cutest thing in the world.
You have mentioned this before.
It's
Cat
my
Lad.
favorite fandom thing that we all kind of, those of us who read fan fiction, forget it's never been canon at all because it's so like driven in the fandom where we're all like, yeah, that time when Tim Drake was Cat Lad.
If only.
My word.
It's amazing. It's my favorite.
There's no horny element to that at all. It's just a really
shockingly, like he's firmly a teenager in it, and she's firmly an adult. So shockingly, it's not a ship. It's like purely family, which is surprising because fan fiction and horny usually go hand in hand.
Well,
Jamie jumping to the horniness like a true Skins writer.
Well, I just assume with fan fiction that it's always going to be creepy.
That's why I led with there's no horny, because I was like, this is about to sound terrible.
So horny.
Well, good for them. Lord. Good for them, I guess.
Good for them. Good for Cat Lad.
Good for Cat Lad. A totally canon thing that really happened.
Yeah. I'll say one of my favorite issues in this book was the Tim Heavy one, where it's kind of him stalking Bane and like. It was, I think it was right after the Zaz confrontation, which was actually pretty scary, I thought. But
Zaz is one of the scariest villains in my opinion.
Scary. And this was the first book I maybe ever read with Zaz, at least in depth. So that was cool. Oh. But the scene where Tim is on the train and he thinks he has Bane got, and then Bane is just behind him. Like it was such a horror movie thing. Yeah. It made Bane very scary, I thought, which was pretty effective.
I can't believe a comic book has jump scares. That shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, it was so effective. It was well done. And just Tim, I was about to just Tim being tied up, like I'm here for that. But
speaking of fan fiction kink.
Terrorized by an enormous crocodile monster.
Yeah. The croc fight with Bane and just that whole issue I thought was really well done.
I love that one too. That is the one where Batman's like, do whatever you want as long as it's away from me and you don't run into Bane. And he's like, yep, got it. And immediately runs into Bane.
No, it's a good one. It's got a really good like set piece to it that they're on that kind of crumbling arch, and then Tim falls into the water, and like the next issue opens with him like being swept away.
The cleanest, bluest sewer water you've ever seen.
It really does look like absolutely inviting and delicious, that sewer water.
Delicious.
There's that wonderful I think it's a bit later on when he's rescuing the mayor in the second sewer issue, but it's got that amazing cover of Batman's face with the rats sitting on top of his face, which is just so awesome. I love it. It's creepy. I think that's another Mike Mignola one, and it's just really awesome. Speaking of the Zaz issue, I think that's the kind of dark heart of Knightfall. I think it's sort of it kind of says everything that the comic wants to say really about Batman really early on, and with this like to me, I've never seen him before or since that character. I know he's in Batman Begins, played by the lead singer of James. You know the guy, the band James?
Yes.
Yeah, that's him playing Zaz.
I forgot he was in Batman Begins. Oh my god.
He tells that amazing story about being in makeup next to Batman and Christian Bale staying in character as Batman. And Tim, I forget his name, Tim Wheeler, is that his name? The dude from James, sitting there, and he just sat there, didn't say anything to him, and they're in makeup for hours and hours. And then he stands up behind him and goes, "You're Tim from the band." The same character, you did that from James. And he went, yeah. And then Batman goes, "That album Layne, man, saved my life," and then walked out of the room. And I always thought that was a really excellent story.
Oh my god.
But yes, Zaz, I digress. Zaz, the kind of heart of the comic, in that like he's this really scary serial killer guy with scars all over his body from all the like hundreds and hundreds of victims he's murdered. It's like a genuinely
terrifying,
creepy concept, and he's terrorizing this school of the
school for women.
Yeah, is it called the school for women? It's called the Bates. Which is like a little bit on the nose there. Like
I know, I was like a serial killer at the Bates School. Also, I don't know if I'd want to go to the Bates School for Women. That feels dangerous.
Yeah, I would maybe spend another 20 minutes on coming up with names for the school there, guys. It's a little bit on the nose.
The Dahmer School for Women.
They should have gone the whole hog and gone the Silence of the Lambs School for Women, because that
the Hannibal School for Women.
But either way, it's just very good. And his like taunting Batman and like really getting to Batman in a big way, and like Batman ending up like going ham on him, which Batman does a few times in this comic, which I'm always happy to see. He really he completely kicks the shit out of Joker and Scarecrow later in this comic, which they seem really upset by, which I really like.
They're
like
surprised.
He really like headbutts them hard, and they're like, ooh, you headbutt.
I think my favorite part of the Zsasz part, like that whole confrontation is really good. But to me, what stood out was when Zsasz was kind of making some points of like, you enjoy the sneaking up on people and the fear that you induce in them.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I think Batman has such a reaction because it's kind of true. Mm-hmm. And like that was like kind of added to the scariness for me, is that like he was kind of right to a degree. Like I thought that was good.
Yeah, it's this funny thing, isn't it? That like and I'm sure you've talked about this a whole bunch on this podcast, but like it's this sort of fundamental thing about Batman in that you have to find a way to engage with the fact that it is a deeply, deeply ridiculous concept at the heart of it, and sort of more ridiculous than say your average superhero comic like Superman, because Superman, it's easy to justify narratively. He's an alien from another planet. He's going to save the world. Where Batman, like the whole idea behind him that childhood trauma causes him to dress up like a bat and beat up criminals, like it's just such an insane concept that often like, you know, I like trying to deal with that. Like the 60s went full, you know, the 60s TV show went full camp. The Christopher Nolan movies turned them into, you know, these meditations on like post-Iraq war politics and, you know, the cost of freedom and all that sort of shit. And you know, like Alan Moore, I always think Alan Moore's version of Batman is, you know, Rorschach in Watchmen, like the idea that if a childhood trauma turned you into a superhero, a vigilante, that is an act of fascism, right? You would become a sort of fascist. And so like, it's always interesting to me. And it's this sort of banal cliche about the Joker sort of, you know, saying him that he's the sort of two sides of the same coin, this kind of insane response to an insane world. Yeah. But like, I really thought that Zsasz kind of sort of crystallized that in a nice way in that issue, because he's like, he puts it to Batman in a very like tactile way. And the fact that he's marked the amount of victims he has on his skin in the way that you would mark off like days in a prison. That's how he's done it. Yeah. It just seemed to me to like, it just sort of speaks to a kind of perception of the world, a perception of reality that Batman has always been kind of, you know, party to, and a nice kind of, rather than like turning Batman into a kind of, you know, godlike hyper Christ, you know, ridiculous galaxy brain version. It's much more like down and dirty, and it feels sort of real and bodily and kind of a bit less highfalutin.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk a lot on the show about how Batman, especially like these versions of Batman, has undiagnosed OCD, and this situation with Zsasz really stands out to me because he holds himself to this perfectionism that's impossible and blames literally anything that happens in Gotham on himself. So there's this moment in that really stands out to me where he says, I saw 2 new scars on Zsasz and I realized I wasn't soon enough to save 2 more people. And it's just this like, you know, if anything happens, it's my fault. Like I have to hold myself to being the one who stops everything. And, you know, then him literally pushing away the only people trying to help him, like Azrael and Robin, because it has to be him that does it.
Yeah, it's such a reductive and wrong way of looking at the world. But because he is a kind of fascistic figure in his own way, because he is like physical might as a way of you know, dealing with society's ills, like the idea of him even having a sidekick is kind of antithetical to like what he's supposed to be. Right. And of course, like what the sequel comic is going to do is like blow up that violent side massively and say, well, this is what it looks like if you have a guy who doesn't have the scruples of Wayne, and he's going to basically dress up as a cyberpunk robot and fire like lasers.
So TJ is new to Azrael, so can we talk about him for like 5 to 7 hours, because I love him.
I've read a little bit of him in the Tynion Detective Comics, and I'll be honest, it's been my least favorite part of that run. I'm open to him. I'm not a fan yet.
He is very, very, very times another 100 varies 90s. Yeah. Like Todd McFarlane didn't design him, but he definitely saw him and said, "Yeah, that's that. You know, I could do that." because like the version you end up with, like by Contagion, which is like the most heavy metal version of Azrael, is he has like a silver mask and like a massive spiky cape cowl thing,
Yes.
and
Love it.
a literal flaming sword that he runs around with.
I've heard of the sword.
Yeah,
I feel like he is, if I think of like what the most 90s superheroes are, I always think of the X-Men Extreme, that character, and I think of Azrael in DC and just running around looking like they're out of Mad Max. They're just
he's really over the top. But
I love it.
I was totally up for him as a kid. He's like a real kind of fantasy of being. I don't know what quite the fantasy of Azrael is. I mean, part of the fantasy is like you're this ordinary guy who has been quietly programmed into being this kind of incredible super soldier.
It's like the show Chuck.
Yes, it is. It is like the show Chuck. That's right. I mean, and hopefully you'll have me back to discuss the sort of second part in more depth further
100%.
Sure.
down the line. But like where that comic gets to, like the final moment of that part is kind of, it asks that question of like, can you beat your nature? Can you beat your programming? Can you be better than than what the world has sort of set in motion for you? And it has a kind of hopeful sort of beat through that. In this comic, he's in this first part, he's not in it so much. He's mostly a kind of foil for Robin. But he's a really interesting figure because it's kind of acknowledged that he's well up to the task of being Batman if need be. It's just that he's a bit of an untested quantity. Yeah,
without like you said, without some of the rules, like the no kill rule and stuff like that. It's not all that interested in that rule. I think what works for me about him, I mean, I joked earlier, and I've definitely joked before, that he is basically Winter Soldier for people with religious trauma, but that is like genuinely his whole deal. Like Winter Soldier is often, Bucky Barnes is like this metaphor for trauma and how it impacts you and how you can get indoctrinated and stuff like that. But Azrael is that, but for somebody who's really like deeply has been raised very religious, and he has this deep kind of conflicted feeling because he does believe that he has this angel of God in him, and other people are kind of like, I don't know if that's what's going on in you. Something's going on, but I don't know if it's an angel of God. But especially in later comics, like post this point, and like currently the Sword of Azrael that's coming out is so good. I love it so much. Kind of deals with the idea of now he's like grappling with, was it ever like a religious experience I had, or was it a mental health problem that was fed upon by religious people? And it's very interesting, and I like that a lot about him.
Yeah, there's a really good bit in the next part where he gets sprayed by the Scarecrow's fear gas. And nothing happens. The system takes over, and he just sort of rolls with it, and it's just a really awesome moment.
That's a good segue, honestly. The ongoing joke where Joker is like, you could spray me with your fear toxin, nothing's gonna happen, killed me the entire time. He's like, it's gonna be fun, let's enjoy.
Does he do it in this part? Did we get to him doing it?
No, he doesn't do it. That he just keeps threatening to do it, and Joker's like, hit me with it. That sounds like a fun time.
Yeah, he does it in the next part, and it's really good because he clutches his face and goes like, the horror. and then he just starts laughing and says, what other flavors have you got? Which is pretty good.
I liked them. I almost started to ship it by the
they are pretty shippable, actually. Like,
honestly, I'm like, you know what? They kind of work.
They capture actually because supervillain team ups is just kind of bread and butter to these comics.
Yeah.
But actually they capture quite well like having to spend time with someone you don't like or don't know that well.
A group project.
Yeah, there's like a real like there's one scene where they're eating like crisps, like potato chips together, and it's got the real feel of like these guys have been hanging around each other for far too long already, and they're already getting on each other's nerves. And I just enjoyed that. It's a good side of the Joker in particular, because the Scarecrow's so self-serious, it's a good vibe.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with the fact that 90% of their plan was like prank calling people from the mayor's phone.
Yeah, it's good.
It was very 60s Batman to me.
Yeah.
Like the show.
Yeah.
You really wanted Adam West to turn up and
yes,
stand there in
vibe.
that position where he has his hand over his stomach, and I always assume that position is because he's just trying to hold his tummy in, right? Because of the tight costume.
I know, right?
One hand over his tummy and the other hand up to his face, and just sort of walk around in a small semicircle solving clues.
So real. I love that poor mayor was like kidnapped for days before anyone noticed. Poor guy.
Oh, you mentioned the fear gas too, and like I have in my notes, like when Batman got sprayed with the fear gas, like I knew it was going to be like a Robin thing, but the fact that it was Jason getting killed again, and I was like, are you not scared about Tim? Like Jason's already dead. Like I was like, okay.
That is like, this is the era, because he hasn't yet embraced him as a son at this point. Like, and we see like Tim's father is still alive in this continuity. We talk about a lot of the show, like nobody knows what the hell's happening with his parents in current continuity. I think they're dead. We haven't seen them in a long time, but we're not totally
well, his dad gets kidnapped at the end of the second part for reasons I have no idea. I have no idea why.
I don't know.
Chandra's got genocide powers, apparently. I don't know what Tim's dad's got.
Yeah. Don't know what's going on there.
A boomerang in the back. Hey.
Yeah,
maybe. That's not yet, or before now. I honestly can't remember.
On a different continuity, different
time, different place. But oh god, now I'm just fully distracted thinking about the boomerang death. Nope, it's gone.
Sorry, my bad. About Jason.
That was that was really cool for me, because the only other comic I'd read was A Death in the Family, and so that coming out of nowhere, and it's always just like it's a really good, like I don't know what you'd call it, like it's a really good line in the sand for the comics for me, because whenever they reference that, for me, in my own personal canon of Batman, it's the sort of first story. It's a sort of fundamental moment, this kind of foundational story of Batman. So whenever it's referenced, I'm always pleased. And like playing through the one of the Batman things I've liked the most is the the Arkham Asylum games. And like they do a really good version of it in that with Scarecrow. And again, I'm doing the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing gif every time that kind of comes along. It's like, there's my boy, there's Jason.
Oh god, that's so real. I mean, I feel like the thing I was going to say is that he's still at this point holding Tim at arm's length because of Jason's death. So his fear is not yet Tim dying, because he hasn't even let Tim occupy any space in his brain yet. Like this is like right post death of Jason kind of situation.
Yeah, and
Jamie
and later early in part 2, Tim asks him if they should get Nightwing in to be Batman, and Batman says, no, that's he's his own man, I don't want him to do it. And you only later realize that it's because he used to be Robin, and Batman is terrified of losing other Robins, even if they've sort of graduated from a Robin to a Nightwing.
Yeah, he's
wait
like,
for Grant Morrison.
He goes, let Azrael die.
Jamie, I was going to ask you, I'm curious now, since you were a kid, and this was the first story you read, Death in the Family, so you've heard about like the phone call. Would Jason die? What would you have voted when you were a kid?
Yeah, I don't know, because my only introduction to him was as a guy who was clearly dead on the cover. So I don't know.
Enough.
Like I've never read a comic when he was alive. Do you know what I mean? Like I never read a Jason Todd comic, so I've got no idea. Like if it was Tim Drake, I'd be like, absolutely not. That kid
right.
That kid is exactly like me in every way, and I am his avatar in the real world.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
But with Jason, like I think if I can remember correctly, he's a bit of a little shit. He's quite an annoying kid like that's why he was killed off, wasn't it? Because people didn't like him. He was the second Robin. Everyone liked Dick Grayson for God knows what reason, and then they were like, kill this horrible new guy.
Not yet, it wasn't. The ass didn't become so bootylicious until later.
Yeah, no, that's a fair answer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense though. And you are right. Like he is kind of annoying before the death stuff, but I love him so much now. It's hard for me to imagine hating him then.
Yeah, that bit in It's in the Sopranos actually, and like early on in the Sopranos, I think, where Carmela is talking to Tony's mum, and she's talking about how one of her catchphrases is to talk about her dead husband Tony's dad and go, oh, he was a saint, he was a saint. And she says to him eventually, like, you never said anything nice about him when he was alive. I always wonder if Batman would be like that with Jason. It's just like, was he actually that great, or did he just die at a bad moment for you, and you've now sort of he's become your sort of
he's
thing that you
saint-like,
refer to. It's like, well, my parents died, but then this other bad thing happened to me, so I'm going to be referring to that now.
He's like, look, I've been like treading on my parents' death for like 25 years. It was time to update the material.
When I read on the Wikipedia page actually that Knightfall takes place like about 10 or 11 years into him being Batman, like in the kind of comics continuity. Like, wow, what a packed 11 years that's been. My word.
It's shorter now. They've kind of shrunk the timeline because DC refuses to let Batman age above like 35. So they're constantly like, oh no, it's only been like 5 years. And you're like, how? What world has it been 5 years?
That's right.
Was it Eternal where they kept saying 5 years ago?
Yes.
When we started off. Yeah.
Yes. And then we're like in Eternal when he already has 4 children. And you're like, how has he had time to have 4 Robins? There's been 5 years. He had 1 a year.
I'm kind of interested, like, for people like you who've like stuck with this stuff for longer. Like I was a big X-Men fan. Like they were my primary comics in the 90s, right? And I read, pretty much everything. Probably read pretty much all X-Men stuff up to, the kind of. But then once you get to like House of M and all the sort of reality dividing stuff and all the kind of Galaxy Brain storylining, which has always been a part of comics, but it does seem in the modern era to have really gone buck wild. It's just so hard to keep track of anything and to kind of keep track of characters. Like, are you able to actually enjoy those characters when they're kind of lost in a sort of multiverse of madness, for want of a better term?
Yeah, I think for me, and like kind of what we do on the show is we make a joke of it, because there's no one anywhere that can explain it. Not the Batman writers, like nobody knows whose age is what or what is currently canon, and we're just kind of like, cool. If nobody knows, then we could all be confused together and just like. So I think, at least for me, having grown up with it, I grew up with it in fandom internet era, so the fandom has collectively decided this part's canon and this part isn't, and I'm just like, great, we can ignore what we don't want to because it'll change tomorrow anyway. So it's just, I don't know.
It's good as well. You have like a way of like keeping track of those things as well within a fandom, because there's things that become references or memes or whatever, or like opinions that kind of become popular and stuff like that. I guess when I was into it in the 90s and stuff like that, it just didn't exist. It was just me reading the 5 comics I had. So I guess that's why that kind of feels a bit more comfortable to me. But I'm sure if I kind of came up in a bit more of a
internet era,
a wikified era, it'd be a bit more easy to track.
And definitely,
you mentioned sorry.
No, I was just gonna, before we transition on, I actually do want to ask you a question, TJ. But I wanted to say, there's certainly people we've interviewed that are really bothered by it, that want it to all fit like really neatly. But if you feel like that, DC Comics is probably not where you want to live, because go over to Marvel, where some shit makes a little more sense. If you want to embrace DC, you've got to kind of be comfortable being like, okay, I thought that was canon, but we already just erased it today with no explanation. All right, we're just going with it. But that said, TJ, how has this been for you? Because you are obviously new to Batman as of this show. How has it been for you that there's no like fucking order to canon?
I mean, I'm a person who I love making a list. So like when we started covering Batman books and I went exploring on my own, I actually have a list of like, continuity wise, what you would do in what order, what's required, how it makes sense. So like I did that for myself because that's what I find comforting. And I'm like, oh yeah, like I can put this new series that just came out, which is Batman as a teenager, I'll put that first. But it doesn't jive with any, you know what I mean? So like in my own brain, I have an order that I find comforting and reassuring, but I understand that it doesn't make sense.
And I love, because your order, I think that's really interesting, because I've seen your list, Avi, and it is modern continuity put into an order rather than starting from the past and trying to make the present work. You're starting from the present and trying to make the past work, which I think may be the best way to go to make this shit make sense currently.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because for me, like, canoninity is sort of less important to me. It's having an emotional anchor
That's how I feel too.
to the character, and like if you can still have that, then it's fine. I guess I worry that that's the thing that gets lost. I mean, Grant Morrison did that run, didn't he, where he basically presupposes that everything you've ever seen about Batman all happened to him, and kind of like him using that as a kind of way to embrace the characters. And
they use they pronouns now. That's new as of last year. So
Grant Morrison does. Oh, apologies. Yes.
Okay.
So them doing it that way is kind of interesting to like really lean into that sort of multiplicity. But I'm always kind of worried that I'll get lost. But I guess
and that run specifically, you can get lost in.
Well, I mean, in Grant Morrison, I want to get lost in their work.
There you go.
So that's fine. But with I guess the idea, isn't it, that like if it's Batman, well, it's always Batman. So he's your anchor. He's always the same. He never changes that much, which I guess is the idea behind superheroes. But that is always the struggle for me with kind of staying up to date with these stuff.
I think each sorry.
No, it's okay. Okay. You mentioned the House of M for X-Men, and so I love X-Men. That's like my main thing. Grew up on them, and like I started right around the House of M era. So I find it funny that you're like, that's kind of where you fell off, because that's where I hopped on. And just like what I would do is just like any big crossover, I hate getting interrupted in the main narrative. So I would just like read the Wikipedia article on the huge crossover like House of M, and then go back to my book that I like, and and not care about any of the big multiverse shit going on.
X-Men, you really they love a big crossover, the X-Men.
I skip those. But nowadays you can't.
I do love that even though Batman's always involved in the big DC events, it almost has no impact on the main story. And I'm like, yes. So Lazarus Planet is happening right now. It has no impact on what's happening in the comics with Batman. And I'm like, good.
All right. Should I redirect us back to Knightfall before we wrap up?
So
the one blonde, Gordon's wife, is the girl he had an affair with in year 1.
Shut up! That's the one he cheated on his wife with. He married her.
She's back. Sarah's back.
Oh my god! Do you know the lore of the affair wife? Because we've been very mad about it.
Well, I've read year 1 and I seem to remember something along those lines. Yeah,
it's legitimately the woman that he cheats on his wife with, and then he has her sent to a different department because he cheated with her and they can't work together anymore. So he fucks up her job and career, and then apparently marries her. Like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, she's back. This was
Let's stay mad about it.
Yeah,
and Montoya was here.
I know, I did like that.
She's so cool. I love her.
Every time Montoya's around, I'm just like, we're safe. We're in Montoya's hands. We're going to be okay.
I found out in my Googling, I know Montoya was created for the Batman animated series show, but she premiered in the comics first, which I found interesting. Kind of like Batgirl, like Barbara Gordon and Renee were both created for their shows, but they were introduced in the comics first to kind of
nice idea. Bed them in.
Found that interesting.
She's one of the several women in the comic who get to shout at Batman and tell him off for being an idiot.
I love
it. Gordon's wife, like I feel like it's so like, you don't know where to look, where she's like having a go at Batman, even though Gordon's been like dosed up with fear juice. And she really gives him an earful. And Batman's face, he's like, oh.
I'm obsessed with how many, because like a lot of the comics we read, people are very intimidated by Batman. Not Knightfall. Everybody's telling him to go fuck himself in Knightfall. She's just like, I can't believe you're here to mess with my husband again. Get out of here.
It's really good. He's like, no, you don't get it. I was being a nice boy. We're mates.
He's my bro.
I was just saying, I was laughing at the end, the confrontation with Bane, and he's like, I would kill anyone for any reason, just for looking at me funny. And I was at work. I started practicing my Bane voice at work just so I could do this for you. He'd be like, I would kill for a Klondike bar. I was like, oh, that's my joke for the episode.
That was good.
It was good. I like that.
I did love that panel. He's like, I'd just kill for the funsies, like as a treat.
Yeah.
He is kind of ridiculous, Bane. It does get to that problem where he's like, I want Gotham. And you're always just like,
But
Why?
why? But
Why?
why?
It's
But why?
It's
It's a shitty
shithole.
city. Nobody
Yeah.
wants Gotham, including the people that live there.
Which which kind of robs him of some agency. I mean, it's funny, you
Mhm.
can read, it's in the other versions of it, you can read Bane's origin story, which is kind of cool origin story, and they do it in the Dark Knight movie.
Yeah.
Basically sort of word for word. So it's quite good fun. But he is it is funny when he's like, yeah, I'd kill for any reason. I'd
Yeah.
I'd kill to silence a buzzing fridge. I'd kill to, get the last Coke in the fridge. It's like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, good for you, I guess.
I am, yeah, I know. I am obsessed with like, for me at least, it's like Joker, Bane, Hush are some of his main like top villains. Not as in like the ones I like the most, but just feel like the most his villain. And they're all basically like, what if we were the most irrational people ever? Just to make it so hard for the world's most rational detective, what if we were just fucking insane? No explanation, no need. We do it for fun.
I love his like Bane's crew as well, who are just deeply dorky. Like one of them got a bird.
His name is just Bird. Like that's his whole code name. Is they just call him Bird.
When Batman fights the bird, it's so funny.
The falconer.
We get some monkey on bird action as well. Yeah, so there's Bird. I only realized recently that they're all named after 60s psychedelic acts. So there's Bird after the birds, there's Trog after the Trogs, and there's Zombie after the zombies.
I didn't even notice that. That's
I only knew it from a Wikipedia article, but I think that sounds like Alan Grant, the writer. That sounds like his vibe, because he was always very into like music. Rest in peace. He died recently.
Yeah.
Another comic I had of his was his Anarchy series, which is just like far too like big for my brain. Reading it as a kid, it's just like, here's a supervillain who is the embodiment of the political ideal of anarchy, as laid out in these very obscure books, and it's just like, what? It's just so far above the head of a small boy reading a Batman comic.
So funny.
This guy espousing on like political theory at length.
Oh, Anarchy, how we missed you. No. Isn't Anarchy the one that has? Am I totally making this up, TJ? Isn't Anarchy the one that has a crush on Tim Drake?
Anarchy. Oh, yeah. Is that like right? the tech guy?
Yeah. In later version, to Anarchy 2.0, to be clear, not the old Anarchy,
but the second old Anarchy with the golden face and the big red cloak and the enormous hat and the
second Anarchy is the one that like is just crushing on Tim Drake so hard.
I believe so. It was in the Red Robin run, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one. I was like, why do I remember that?
I kept forgetting about the ventriloquist in this. He kept popping back up, and his like when they're like, "No, you need a police officer," and he comes up with the police officer puppet. I lost it.
I am a big fan of Bo Burnham, and I had totally forgot that he is a fan of Batman, because he has an entire thing at his latest special about Socko, the sock puppet. And so when I got there, I was like, "It's Socko!"
It's really weird. They track through his story quite closely.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just ends that he ends up killing himself. It's really strange. It's like
what's going on?
It's like, let's check back in with the ventriloquist again, and like he's further on his quest to pick up Scarface, and then he gets him. I mean, it's quite funny that the Socko personality has now become too strong, and they end up bickering, and he just shoots him. It's committing suicide, but it's kind of interesting, but it doesn't really. It doesn't feed into the main story at all. It's just, you
gotta wonder, like, did they have pages to fill? Like, what happened with that? I liked it. I didn't weirdly was not bothered by the random intrusions of other stories, but it was like, it doesn't serve any narrative purpose or metaphorical purpose that I can see at all. I don't know.
It's like Poochie vibes of like, when he's not in a panel, people need to be asking, where's ventriloquist? When's he coming back?
Where's he at? 100%. I did love how Batman just kept dragging these villains and being like, when are the real bad guys gonna strike? We've had are these B-listers.
Yeah.
Was it Poison Ivy who said sugar daddy? Is that her?
Yes. And he called her a hag and kicked her in the face. I was like, good Lord.
It's feminism.
I have to say, maybe this is my oldness talking, but I just adore the fact that Poison Ivy is just drawn as a crazy lady and not a hyper porn sex demon from the plant dimension. I
No,
mean,
I liked her like this. Yeah.
I don't wish to be a prude, and I'm generally not, but I always find like maybe it's just because the way artists deal with her is like, here's my chance to
Mhm.
do my take on this ridiculous, like
Yeah. But she's
parody
often
of a
over
woman.
sexualized. You're not wrong. I like nowadays she's more plant than woman, and I kind of
Right,
like
okay,
that
yeah.
for her. She's very green skin and all kinds of stuff. But yes, during this time she was over sexualized a lot, and there really isn't much of that in this, to be honest, which is nice.
No, I really like her portrayal in this one. I'm mostly thinking about the Arkham games, which really go ham on the boobs
Oh,
with her.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just to a degree of like, oh, it's inappropriate, you know. Like,
Have you ever seen somebody did a like of the Arkham games? They switched the design of Batman and Catwoman so that Batman walks like Catwoman and Catwoman
That's
walks
good.
like Batman, just to kind of illustrate how sexualized they are. So you watch Batman being like, ah.
It's so funny.
that's very good. I
Yeah.
love that.
And like, Poison Ivy is sexy, like no matter
Oh,
what.
yeah.
So I feel like there's a way to draw her, and she's
Yeah, because she is very
still
sexy,
sexy.
but she's not
Yeah,
like.
and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, or her, you know,
Mhm.
or her sexuality or anything like that. I think that's good. It's just,
Mhm.
it's just like it's
Sometimes
wrong.
she's drawn like a 13-year-old boy's fantasy, and sometimes
Yeah,
she's drawn like a
right.
person. Yeah.
Yeah,
make it
and the
tasteful.
third, it's just not sexy to be drawn like that. To me, it's just, oh god,
Right.
girl, like, you know, you're gonna get cold.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about your back. Like
Yeah,
carrying
your
boobs that
back.
big, you're gonna have back pain.
Yeah, she definitely has
Well-
some sort of plant based.
Brace
Yeah.
Brace made out of plants.
made out of plants, just holding her back up. Somebody draw that for us. I want to see her. I want to see her in a plant corset that supports her back. Give us that.
Absolutely, yeah, really sensible. Like,
Please.
yeah.
Well, is there anything else in this volume that we haven't talked about yet that we want to bring up?
Just
Yeah.
lots of images of Batman looking really sad.
Oh, I
so
love
funny.
them.
Really
We
upset.
didn't talk about the art. I sometimes I miss how dynamic the art was at this time, because I feel like we don't always get dynamic art now. Like the art, I think sometimes can be more beautiful now, but I feel like you don't get that movement of faces and bodies like we did back then, especially of
Mm.
expressions. I was obsessed with everyone. I want people to memeify every one of Batman's faces in this comic because they were so good.
We
He's
didn't
like,
read
"I
it for
wanna
this one,
die."
but yeah, he's so tired. We
He's so
didn't
tired.
read it for this, but in the final panel of the sort of previous issue where Bane breaks everyone out of prison, is just Batman screaming. It's just him going, ah! And Bane's looking at him through binoculars, like being good. It's like that. And it's really excellent. I
Oh,
want more of
God.
people to, just
Yes.
wordlessly screaming in frustration at stuff. And
Somebody,
so many like issues of this end with just him just like sitting in an alleyway, like staring at the floor, just looking sad.
How many people in this comic tell him he looks like shit? It's so
Yeah. I
funny.
love it.
Just endless
Was it-
negging of Batman. Like, so
Who was it that
you look
popped
like
up for like a
utter wank.
scene? Was it Huntress who pops up and she's
Yeah,
like,
she does.
okay,
Yeah.
and she's like, no, I bet Batman never gets tired. And then it cuts to Batman literally looking like he's dying.
That was funny. I
That
did
was
like
so
that.
funny.
Yeah.
But just on the like the blocking in this and the action is so well paced, particularly in those like set piece sequences in the sewers, which were just amazing. The
So
fight
good.
between Bane and like Croc, it's just so legible and tactile, and they use the panels like really creatively for these like big punchy moments, like literal punchy moments. And like the Firefly, is he called Firefly? The
Yeah.
arsonist guy.
Yeah.
Like the stuff with him in the back end of this is just like incredible. Like there's that one image of Batman's like his cape all burnt off, kind of coming out of the flames, and the
Yeah,
bit
that's
where
good.
he finally catches him by sort of jumping through. It's just like you don't often see action that good, or I haven't seen action that
know.
good in these
really-
comics.
It's really good. I loved the Bane Croc fight. That I was obsessed
Yes.
with. It was just so fun to see the
They
two.
fought in Batman Eternal too.
Yeah, they did. I know.
I
will
feel like
always
Eternal's
see them
just
fight.
like super inspired by this.
Yeah, it almost feels like Eternal, because like I feel like it's an answer to this, because like I said earlier, it's the one in which Batman actually realizes he has to ask for help instead of this one, which, you know, maybe that was him learning. He was like, I didn't ask for help last time, and Azrael ran around killing people for a year, so let's not do that again.
I like Croc's got his little plaster cast on as well. That's quite cute.
It's so cute.
Yes.
I love Croc. Croc is one of my all-time favorite characters, and he is, excuse me for saying, hot in the. What were they doing? What are they doing? Giving Croc a crop top and a six-pack abs?
Yeah, he does. He's got like almost like a young Sylvester Stallone vibe to him, doesn't he? I kind of sort of
I
cheat on it.
missed all this.
You gotta go back. I think I sent you.
I'm gonna go
Didn't I
back.
send you? I sent you screenshots of it, TJ.
Oh, you
where
did.
he's like his tongue's all out and he's like, ah.
Yeah, Chris was like, what else can he do with that tongue?
Yeah, of course.
Look, the monster fuckers were fed with this issue.
Rock fucker.
I'm not gonna deny it. Croc's hot, but usually he looks a lot more like a crocodile. In this one, it was like I don't know, could be played by Hemsworth.
Mm.
He's another Hemsworth brother.
Or maybe get one of the
Hemsworth.
Hemsworths to play that Amygdala guy, the angry guy.
Yes.
He was cool.
Oh my God. I was dying. Oh, I have to say, as the resident psychologist in the room, not a single piece of psychology in this book was right. I was like, the amygdala is not an anger part of the brain. It's the fear part of the brain. It's not,
Yeah.
It doesn't do what you think it does, comic book writers.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, I'm going to start with you. If you had to rate this book 1 out of 5 batarangs, what would you give it? And you can break them in half if you need to.
We do that
That's
sometimes.
good to know. Yeah. I think I would give it a solid 4 batarangs. I think, it's as a kind of foundational Batman comic for me. It's really great. I think. It's not the deepest and richest comic,
Sure.
and that's sort of true of all comics, not all comics, but like a great deal of comics really have a really good sense of fun and energy to them. But that's why I kind of, after this, it was always Alan Moore who was my kind of go-to on these things, because he just felt like he just pushed a bit more into the depths of these things. So yeah, like in terms of like a really good bit of like popcorn comic writing, can't really fault it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Love it. Yeah, this is a 4, maybe a 4.5. I actually really enjoyed it. Like,
Really?
I know, I am surprised. A lot of the times we've dipped back into the older comics, they haven't held up for me, but this one did. I had fun. I enjoyed the Monster of the Week. I thought the team ups were often very cute, and then Tim Drake nonstop. What more could I ask for? And Azrael, my guy, so, just doing push-ups off in his apartment alone.
the best hair in the
the
Batman
best hair.
expanded universe. Although Tim cuts it off at the beginning, but still.
True.
I'm a party pooper. So I didn't dislike it, but I didn't like actively like it. Besides the Zaz scene and like that Croc Bane fight issue, like that was the high point for me, I think. So like I'm gonna give it a solid 3. Like I was enjoying myself, but I wouldn't have picked it to read for like fun, just because it is dated, and like that doesn't disqualify it, obviously, but like for my personal taste, I was like, I'd rather be reading something else.
And you had
overall.
some issues with the like Monster of the Weakiness of it too, didn't you say?
It felt a little like, I know the point was that Batman was getting tired, but like by like the 5th villain that shows up, I'm like, come on, let's just get to the Bane fight. Like, I was like, it's not really adding anything for me.
Were you not invested in the ventriloquist mighty story?
No, I wasn't.
Which doesn't
but,
even
like,
end with Batman. He doesn't even get to fight him.
Yeah,
He just
but it was
gets
like,
shoots
it's a
himself.
classic, so I'm
Yeah.
glad I read it.
Yeah.
So
It's
thank you for
basically
recommending.
like the video game vernacular is like a boss rush, isn't it? It's like Batman boss rush
Yes.
mode where he
Yeah.
has to like fight all the way through the game and then get his.
Yeah, it's
I
very
think
you're
Arkham
so right.
Asylum.
We didn't
Yeah.
mention that iconic moment, by the way, where Bane breaks his back. It's
Oh
pretty good.
yeah. How did we talk
Oh,
about
yeah, I
this
guess we
the whole
should.
time and never talk about the back breaking? But
And
yeah,
they foreshadow it like right before. They're like, you have no spine. And then he breaks his back.
I know. I was kind of howling knowing that was about to happen. I was like, if you could write any Batman story in the world, what would you write?
Yeah, so I had to think about this actually, and I thought you could do a thing where you do a Bruce Wayne story. You don't do it about Batman, like Batman isn't included at all, and you do like a kind of post Occupy Wall Street story
Ooh.
about Bruce Wayne like trying to give away all of his money and all of his wealth
Yeah.
and like break down Wayne Enterprises, and like that being a kind of, I assume it's quite a difficult thing to do, like fairly, and like having to deal with like all of his money being out in the world, and like who he gives money to, and not letting his own like people he trusts be corrupted by it. And yeah, just being like an entirely office based
I love it.
Batman comic with just Bruce Wayne struggling with like his own part in late stage capitalism.
Ooh, okay, I love it.
And failing to be a decent human being, despite his best efforts, because wealth like corrupts.
And the Joker's just like outside with an "Eat the Rich" sign, and he's like,
yeah, I think that's exactly what you do. You'd have all the rogues galleries turn up just as like protesters in a non-violent form, and you never know if they're actually them or they're people dressed up as them, but they speak with those voices, and when he goes into work in the morning, everyone's shouting at him to be a better human being. So yeah, that's my pitch for a Batman comic.
Why was the Joker movie not that instead of what the Joker movie was? I love it. Well,
That's
where
amazing.
can our listeners find you, and do you have anything to promote?
To promote, I do a podcast called The Crate and Crowbar, which is about video games, which is slightly hiatus at the moment, but it's very good. I was a fan of it, and then they asked me to join, so
yay!
It's a good time. That the new book by Kelly Link, which I think is called White Cat's Black Dog or something like that, but it's just really good, so you should read that. And I'm on Twitter at Matron Boy. Yes.
Yeah. Well, we've had an absolute blast talking to you, and
Awesome. Me too.
Love for you to come back and do the second part of Knightfall. And if you want to do the Sword of Azrael and see how he's doing nowadays, you can come back and join me for that, because I need to convert TJ to Azrael side.
Yeah. No, anytime, Jamie. This was so amazing. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Next time, we'll be talking about the Blue Beetle movie.
Woo woo. So excited. It's going to be me, Chris, and Mark. Again, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite DCEU movies, and it's going to be a good time.
Me too. Is it DCEU? Maybe we'll get into it.
I guess it's, technically, but it's like, I feel like it's a weird middle ground.
We don't really know.
They could keep it.
But it'll just be us three co-hosts of the podcast. So
yeah,
please tune in for that. Thank you for listening to this episode of Gotham Outsiders. You can find me, Chris, at Linktree/The Myth of Psyche, where you can find all of my social media, where I'm on Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter, and all the various places. You can also find all of my other projects where I'm writing, and the other podcasts I host, including Thirsty on Tune, which I host with my friend Bronwyn, where we talk about independent projects like books and webtoons, and on the Talking Comics podcast, where I am also a host now. And where can they find you, TJ?
You can find me at TroyFin2 on most social media platforms like Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, a lot. You can find me talking a lot about books, gay things, gay books, and I am a librarian in my professional time and for fun sometimes. So please hit me up if you want a good book recommendation or you have one for me.
And where can our listeners find you, Mark?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at I am El Diablito, and also on Sunday evenings with the Broaxium crew. Show is called Shooting the Poodoo. We are on at 6 p.m. PST, 9 p.m. EST.
And you can find us all on social media at Gotham Outsiders on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky. So thank you for listening, and join us next time. Same bat time, same bat place.